All right, today we are diving into one of the deepest, most persistent mysteries in all of physics. It's a story about a single, solitary number that has captivated and, frankly, obsessed some of the greatest scientific minds for more than 100 years. You just heard the voice of the legendary Richard Feynman, and he's talking about something called the fine structure constant. It's a number that's super close to 1 over 137. Now, this number basically sets the rules for how light and matter interact. And here's the crazy part. For a century, we've measured it with unbelievable accuracy, but we have had absolutely no idea why it's that specific number. It's like finding a rule book for the universe, but the first and most important rule has no explanation at all. So, here's our game plan. We're going to unpack a brand new theory that claims it has finally cracked this cosmic code. We'll start with the mystery itself, then look at a wild new answer based on geometry. We'll see how the theory actually calculates the magic number, and then, get this, how it expands to cover not one, but 3 fundamental forces. And finally, we'll connect it all back to the very blueprint of the cosmos. Okay, so let's get right into it. What is this number really, and what makes it so incredibly baffling? The fine structure constant, which scientists call alpha, is like a fundamental dial setting for our universe. It tunes the strength of electromagnetism, the force responsible for pretty much everything we see, from holding atoms together to light itself. But the most important thing to understand is that it's dimensionless. It's not measured in meters or kilograms or seconds, it's just a pure number. The universe could have picked literally any value for this dial. So, why this one? Physics, up until now, has had no answer. It's just a number we measure and plug into our equations.
But what if it's not random? What if that number is the only one it could be, thanks to some deeper, hidden structure? Well, that is exactly the claim of a new idea called mode identity theory, or MIT.
And this chart right here really gets to the heart of it. You see, the standard model of physics, our current best theory, just treats alpha as a fact of life. We measure it, we use it, end of story. Mode identity theory, on the other hand, proposes something absolutely radical, that the value of alpha can be derived. Not measured, but calculated from first principles. It suggests the number isn't fundamental at all, but that it emerges from a kind of geometric blueprint for reality. So, of course, the billion-dollar question is, how? How on earth can a theory build one of the universe's most fundamental constants out of pure geometry? Well, the theory claims the recipe is surprisingly simple. It just takes 3 specific steps. Okay, here's the recipe. First, the theory starts with a specific geometric grid made of 60 units. Why 60? Because photons, the particles that carry the electromagnetic force, are bosons, and this is the grid that corresponds to them. Second, it has to pinpoint where matter actually lives on this grid, which turns out to be at position 13. And finally, and this is the real kicker, it looks at the universe's fundamental energy scale, which it calls omega. But instead of using the whole thing, it says you only need to take one single minimal step along that scale. Just 1/60th of its power. So you follow those 3 geometric rules, you run the numbers, and boom. The theory predicts a value for alpha of 0.00733. Now compare that to the value we've measured in countless experiments for decades, 0.00730. That is an agreement of over 99.5%. That's not just in the ballpark. That is an astonishingly accurate prediction for a number that was supposed to be a total mystery. Okay, but hold on a minute. Let's be skeptical, because we should be. Is this just fancy numerology? Did they just mess around with numbers until they found a combination that worked? That's the first question any good scientist would and should ask. Well, they anticipated that question, so they ran what they called a uniqueness scan. First, they just threw thousands of random combinations of their own building blocks at the problem. And sure enough, they got about 3 hits, which is pretty much what you'd expect from pure random chance. But then they did it again, only this time they limited the search to only the 47 combinations that actually followed the theory's own internal rules. And out of those, they got exactly 1 hit, the correct one. The theory's own logic seems to force it into picking the right answer. Okay, so the theory seems to work for electromagnetism, and that's already a huge deal. But this is where the investigation gets truly wild. The theory doesn't stop there. It claims its geometric blueprint doesn't just describe one force of nature. It describes 3. It does this with something called a gauge ladder, by applying one single simple rule. Based on the known properties of each force, it generates a whole ladder of predictions. Think of it like a toolkit. You've only got 2 main components to work with, that 60-unit grid and a related 120-unit grid. Depending on whether the force behaves in a bosonic or a spinorial way, You just slot in the right grid. This simple process naturally spits out 3 unique combinations, 3 rungs on the ladder. And what do you know? There happen to be exactly 3 forces in the standard model ready to climb them. And then there's this one other fascinating little detail. The theory predicts a tiny correction factor, which it calls the Plato twist. Now, the crucial part is that this twist only applies to the weak nuclear force. Why? Because the weak force is the only one of the 3 that's known to violate mirror symmetry. It literally behaves differently from its own reflection. So this twist is like a special key that only fits into one lock. If you try to force it onto the other 2, it completely messes up their predictions, which makes the whole thing feel even less like a coincidence. So let's step back and look at the final scorecard. Using this one consistent geometric framework, this modality theory predicts the strength of electromagnetism to within 0.5%, the strong nuclear force to within 1.4%, and the weak nuclear force to within an incredible 0.4%. I mean, think about that. One rule, one set of geometric objects, predicting the strength of 3 of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. This is already pretty profound stuff, but the theory makes one last, absolutely mind-bending claim that connects the smallest particles to the largest scale we can possibly imagine, the energy of the entire universe itself. And here it is, the theory's most powerful idea. It suggests that the cosmological constant, that's the energy of empty space, the vacuum, and our fine structure constant alpha, come from the exact same cosmic energy scale, omega. The best way to picture it is to imagine a vast staircase. The cosmological constant is what you get when you take the entire staircase in one giant leap. And the fine structure constant alpha? That's what you get when you take just the very first tiniest possible step. And this framework also explains something else we actually see in experiments, the fact that alpha's value isn't perfectly constant. It runs or changes depending on how much energy you're probing it with. The theory predicts that way back at the birth of the universe, at the highest possible energies, alpha's value was actually close to 1. But as the universe cooled and expanded, that single 1/60th step ran the value all the way down to what we measure in our low-energy world today, about 1/137. So, the ultimate thesis of this whole theory is just incredibly elegant. The fine structure constant isn't some random magic number after all. It is, quite literally, the fine structure of the cosmological constant. It's the vast energy of the vacuum, resolved all the way down to a single fundamental step on its geometric ride. And that just leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. For 100 years, we've thought of the universe's constants as these arbitrary dials just set to random values. But if a theory like this is on the right track, if they are instead the logical, calculable result of a single unified geometric blueprint, it just makes you wonder, what else is written in that cosmic code?